Hi, this is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. Just privileged today to have with us Austin McCurdy from Sharper Personnel. And a little bit of a different direction today. We're going to, a lot of our podcast on our platform, we talk a lot about finances. And today we're going to talk and focus specifically on hiring. I've known Austin, I guess, probably for most of his life.
Yeah.
Actually, my parents actually bought the house that he lived in when he was a younger guy, and then through the years we attended a local assembly here together for a few years. Now we have the opportunity probably cross paths in venues across the country more than we do here locally. But I think you'll find today's podcast a tremendous value is we're going to kind of dig in just a little bit in regards to hiring specifically. And Austin owns a company called Sharper Personnel, and has really just become an expert in many ways. And I know that word's kind of thrown around a lot, but really become an expert on the hiring process. And Austin, I think you owned a number of Papa John's franchises for a number of years here in the Northwest Indiana area. And through that process, and probably also through owning other companies and working with people, I've learned a lot. Then, of course, I just really dug in and studied into a couple areas that we'll talk about as we go through this. So, Austin, and for somebody who started up a company, and for myself as well, started up a company, I'd always we kind of run through that hurdle of going and hiring our first employee. Or we get to the point of wanting to scale our business, and one thing is always, okay, we want to hire a person for their skills. We're trying to find that perfect employee. But I think a lot of times maybe companies make mistakes by not evaluating such things as culture and core values before they go into hiring an employee. What is more important, or what sort of weight should be given to core values and culture more than skills, or should it be weighed equally? What does that look like?
Sure. Well, I'll I guess introduce myself a little bit, then
Sure,
I'll
please.
lead into that question too. So yeah, it was something that working in a high turnover business, I think I figured out one day I had 6,000 people that came through the door. So we were always hiring, literally every day when we built up the scale, hiring every day, usually terminating every day. Like, it was just always a constant process. To then when I started working with Sharper, and working with small companies from a business consulting standpoint, one of the first things that comes up is this question almost every time. Hey, we're wanting to scale, we're wanting to grow. Step number one is we have to hire people. When we set 90-day goals with you guys, we work with you as well. First goal is always revenue. What are we going to do for revenue this quarter? My second question is always, who are we going to hire? It's always revenue, because the revenue is going to determine if we can even hire somebody. And then it's, okay, what position are we hiring for this quarter? And so working with small to medium-sized businesses, they just don't hire a lot. It's not something that's constant. They may make one or two hires a quarter, maybe. Two would be a lot, maybe one, right? So they're not familiar with the process. They don't know what to ask. They don't know a lot of those questions. And so that's where it kind of just came up that I just did it a lot, to where now the recruiting company, people are like, hey, can you help us with this? And so we were like, yeah, I guess we could help you with it. So it just kind of organically happened.
Good. We
We started doing a lot of hiring, where I think now, I don't know what we've hired this last year, but several hundred, maybe pushing 500-600 just in the last year, of especially in the real estate space. We actually have moved over into we're hiring somebody in manufacturing right now. What they tell me they're hiring for, or a dental assistant, something like that right now that they're hiring for. So we've kind of moved into different verticals as well with it. Just because, again, small to medium-sized businesses, it's not what you guys do. You don't hire a lot, and kind of need help with that whole process. So jumping over to cultures and core values, it's one of the questions that we ask on our initial questionnaire with everybody is, what are your core values of your company? And those are things that are, they're not real tangible. Like, you don't know what that is. I always tell people this: what really is the difference between you and your competitor? You're an accountant. Me going down the street to whatever other accountant, I'm essentially going to get a very similar product from them. Mm-hmm. Right? So what is the difference? And the difference is the people that work there. I always tell the story that down the street here, right down the street from us, there's a Taco Bell on one side of the street, and there's a Panda Express across the street. Mm-hmm. And it's right down the street from my house. My 7-year-old loves Panda Express. You ask her which ones to eat, we're going to go to Panda Express. The two middle ones like Taco Bell. So it's great. I can go to Taco Bell, drive across the street, pick up the Panda Express. It's all right there. Except that I won't go to that Taco Bell. I'll drive over to the one in the other town. I'll go to that Panda Express, drive back past my house to the other one. Well, what's the difference? I mean, the food is exactly the same. Comes off the same truck. They use the same machinery, right? The same cooking machinery. They use the same processes. Everything's exactly the same, except for one thing, and that's the people who work at that Taco Bell compared to the other one. Right? They always take forever to take my order. They're slow. They usually mess my order up. There's a lot of things going on as to why I won't go there anymore. And so when we're talking to small, medium-sized businesses, it's what is, your people are what going to make the difference. Talk about culture now. I use that example there. What is the difference between those two Taco Bells? Everything else is exactly the same. It's the one has a manager whose culture is, we're going to do it right, we're going to do it fast, we're going to do those things. The other one is just whatever goes. And that goes down to the employees from there. And then the culture is created by the manager, the leadership, and the employees that are working there. So when all new employees are coming in, here's the culture. We'll stay in the fast food thread with that. Think about Chick-fil-A. What really is special about Chick-fil-A? Right now we're in the chicken sandwich wars, right? Everybody's got their own chicken sandwich right now. And Chick-fil-A is still, I think they're the number one per restaurant sales of in the fast food category. And they're not even open on Sundays. They're only open 6 days a week. But you go there and, their Chick-fil-A, their sandwich is good, but it's not like it's this amazing chicken sandwich. I personally prefer the Popeyes one. Don't tell my daughter that. She's like, that's God's chicken at Chick-fil-A, But the chicken sandwich is just a pretty basic chicken sandwich. And but when you go there, what is it about? It's the service. Where is that coming from? They're essentially hiring the same talent pool as everybody else, the same price point as everybody. It's not like they pay an astronomical more for their employees than the other ones do. They've created this culture, right, where they all say, my pleasure.
My pleasure, right.
Right? The culture is one of, they're walking around, people emptying the trash, will see you and say, do you want me to refresh your drink? Right? That culture is just completely different when you go to Chick-fil-A. I opened up one of my stores in the Chicago market here. I won't say which one, but we really, really struggled with employees at that store. Just the getting good employees in and the culture of that restaurant. We had a really hard time with it. I had to bring employees from other stores to try to work there, things like that. When I sold them all, right down the street they opened up a Chick-fil-A. And they're going to pull from the same talent pool I was pulling from, and I thought like they're going to really struggle. They're just late all the time and all kind of stuff. I dealt with stealing and stuff like that. And I pulled up that Chick-fil-A when they opened, and it was like going to any other Chick-fil-A in the country. Right? Really, my misconception, of the employees, they were able to overcome because of the culture that they have in there. So a lot of small businesses, right? You look at large companies, Disney, Apple, you go through them all, and you can quickly Google Papa John's, Google Chick-fil-A, what their core values are, right? What their purpose of their company is. When you get to smaller companies, a lot of us haven't done that. We think, oh, that's just, whatever. It's not that important for us, right? What we're doing today is important. And it really is, because it sets the tone for how you hire, how you fire, how you reward employees. I was just yesterday with a client, one of our consulting clients, and on the list of issues for the quarter, 4 names went on the list. And we literally, first thing I did when we got to him, I didn't ask him what the problem was with the employee. I didn't ask him what their performance level was. I wrote down the core values of the company. The clients of ours, we've identified them. I said, here's your core values. I said, okay, went around the room. I said, where does each one of these employees, are they a plus minus, or a minus? On it. Plus being they exemplify the core value, plus minus, room for improvement, but they hit the minimum standard for us. And then the minus, they're not there at all. And I literally went around the room with the leadership team, about 10 people, and I said plus, minus, and minus. And we wrote it all down, and almost all of them measured them the same in the core value. I forgot which core value it was. I want to say it was hard work or something like that. The hard work category. No, integrity was one of them. All of them ranked them negative, that employee. Mm-hmm. And I literally finished, and obviously in that saying, I never recommend or say they should let somebody go. That's their decision to be made. But all I did was put that up there, and I'm like, any questions? Anything else we need to? I don't know if this is a productive employee or not. It was just somebody they were concerned about, and they all were like, yep, it's time for us to have a conversation with them. Okay. So the core values as a small company don't think this is just some like corporate voodoo thing that they do. It's important for you to know what your core values are. And core values are things that aren't just I'm sorry, it's I'm done. My personal core values are consistency, honesty, respect, and excellence. And when somebody comes along, and Gary will joke about it, but I think you spend time with Eddie Wilson, and when I'm at an event, I try to identify. I'm at one of Eddie's events. One of the things is like he will stop and he will talk to me like there is nobody else in that room. And it's that respect. It's one of my core values, and I recognize that. And it was like I think the world of Eddie. It's literally because I feel like he respects me, and it's a core value for me. As soon as I feel like somebody doesn't respect me, it's like I'm done talking to them. Consistency is another big one of me. So make sure as a company you identify what those are. There's different ways you can go about doing that.
Sure. So there are core values. I know there's kind of like I don't want to say test, but essentially. A process you can go through to kind of identify what the core values are, and it sounds like the core values of course I know what they are for me personally in the company, having gone through this exercise before, but it sounds like the core values really kind of are like the North Star for our company. So if and I know for us here at the firm level, it's kind of one of those things we don't even want to work with a client, so it's not just employees or hiring. Trying to identify whether or not a new potential hire is going to match those core values. But even today, I had 2 sales calls today at the firm level, and when I'm going through asking questions, more than do I care about their structure, do I care about anything else, what they have going on, or their pain points, although we're there to solve the problem. It's really kind of, okay, is this client going to align with our core values, even at that level, to make a determination of whether or not I want to work with them. So the core value is really kind of a North Star, and that sounds like it really should take a little bit, not ultimate preeminence, but definitely take a priority, sometimes maybe a little bit even more than the overall skill set, which we'll get into the analysis here in just a bit, which is kind of where your area of expertise.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, the core values, that is what I recommend, the first in-person interview. And we recommend at least a 3 interview process. We can talk about that in a minute here. But that first in-person interview, that entire interview is about, does this person match our core values of the company? And that's literally what it's all about. At that point, you should have already vetted through their resume and through some other tools whether they're qualified for the position. At this point, and there should have already been a phone interview taking place to kind of verify this is a real person. But by the time they're coming into the office, it should be, are they going to be a core values match in here? We talk a lot about that right person, right seat, and everybody kind of says it like just trivial, like just it's a catchphrase, right people, right seats. Well, really, it's 2 different things going on there. It's the right person in the right seat. You can have the wrong person in the right seat, and you can have the right person in the wrong seat. So right person, wrong seat is somebody that matches your core values, right? They're loyal, hardworking, salt of the earth, just great person. But then the wrong seat, which is they can't achieve the goals that the business needs them to achieve, right? They can't produce what the company needs them to produce. Wrong person, right seat is that person that doesn't match your core values, but they can get the results you want. Right, they're the person that comes in the office and everybody cringes and nobody wants to deal with them, but they get the results. I often find it's easier to fire those people than it is the people that match your core values. But when you have the wrong person in the wrong seat, like it can really wreak havoc, especially as a small business owner. Okay. You don't have the leeway that the large corporations have with it. But
okay, and then we'll probably pick up on a couple of these as we run through the rest of these questions. But we're going through the hiring process. Is it sometimes it's kind of like especially maybe business owners who are more focused on the bottom line than maybe having the highest quality person that to come in. But what does that decision making process look like as far as should I just settle for someone who's willing to take less pay? Maybe I'm not going to get as high of a quality of work out of them. Or is it better off most of the time for businesses just to say, what, I'm going to pay more, maybe even pay a premium to make sure that I have the highest quality employee? Or is that kind of one of those things that really just depends on what quote unquote seat I'm trying to fill in my company?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot, and it's a complicated one. Unfortunately, there's no straight answer to it. I always first off ask people, what's your budget? Like, what can you really afford? right? Because let's say you're looking for, right now we look for a lot of integrators or COOs for small companies, right? Operations managers, and you can hire one for 50 grand, and you can hire one for 250 grand. And both of them, and sometimes you don't need the $250,000 one. Like it's just not what you need. But it's like you could spend all over the map for one, or where do you land with it? So first, I think you have to figure out what can the company afford, and what are you looking for at that level. Number two is I always recommend you pay as much as you possibly can pay at the higher end of it. I think you get what you pay for, right? I think this is too. I'm finding that a lot of business owners are not. Especially we work a lot in the real estate space, and they're used to running comps on houses, but they don't run comps on their jobs. What I mean by that is they don't go to the job boards and say, how much are my competitors paying? If I'm looking to post a job for an integrator, how much is everybody else paying for a COO in this market? Right? How much is everybody else paying for a salesperson? I've seen a lot of people that have been posting jobs at half the price of what the market is getting for it, and then they don't get any applicants, and they can't figure out why. It's like you're not in the range. At the same time, you shoot at the bottom of the range, and you can go to a place, I think it's salary.com, where you can actually put in your zip code and the job and find it out. Go to Indeed, look it up. It's not going to cost you anything to do it. Take you about 60 seconds. And they'll give you a range. And then guys will pay the bottom of the range. I'm like, well, then you're going to get the bottom of the applicants are going to apply. Let's say it's a 60 to 90 range, the $90,000 employee is not going to apply for the $6,000 job. Well, you're paying for experience, is what you're paying for. So back to the original question is, how much experience do you need this person to have? If this is somebody you're looking at saying, okay, my company this position is kind of a new position, this is somebody that can grow within this position, you probably can pay towards the bottom of the range, understanding though what you're going to get. You're going to get somebody that's going to have to grow with the position. If you're like, okay, we just lost somebody, we need to bring somebody in, you're going to pay at the top of that range with it. I read some interesting information in the last couple of weeks. You were just at the event, I was talking about it. Somebody who's a passive candidate, in other words, they're working somewhere they're not looking to leave their job, their number one motivator to get them to leave their job is money. Like that's what will take to move them. You take somebody who is actively looking for a job, and when they surveyed those people, they found that they were looking for advancement opportunities. It wasn't so much about the money; it was they were looking for advancement, additional training, things like that. So it's if you're trying to pull somebody from somebody else, you're probably gonna have to pay a lot more. And again, I was correct. You're paying for experience. How much experience do you really need? You need to kind of evaluate that, and then be prepared to pay. If you need someone with experience, be prepared to pay quite a bit, especially in this market right now that we're in. There's a lot of jobs out there, and people are getting a premium even when they don't have the experience because they're just paying so much right now. So you do kind of prepared for that.
Okay.
My recommendation is get what you pay for, pay as much as you possibly can.
Okay. So I'm an established company. I'm going to make a determination. I have a seat that needs to be filled. Is there kind of a process in place or a process as far as in thinking as it relates to whether or not I hire from within? So I have an empty seat, say it's middle level or upper level of management in the company. How do I go about making that decision whether or not I should hire from within, promote from within versus going outside the company and bringing somebody else new in?
Yeah. My suggestion, and we actually have this on our questionnaire as well, is are there any internal candidates? Like, is there anybody internally? It should always be your first go-to is internally. To go back to the first thing we talked about, hopefully by this point, you know if that person in your company is a good culture fit. So you've already taken that off. They also already have an understanding to some degree of the company itself, and more than likely the position that they would move into. So the learning curve is much, much quicker. You don't have to explain them company policies. You don't have to explain how things run around here. They already understand. They're just learning a new job. And back to I mentioned that people who are actively looking for a job are because there's no advancement opportunities in their current company. So it also shows that you have a culture of promoting from within and moving. My dad worked at UPS for 35 years. Mm-hmm. He started out working as a clerk. Then he moved into a package car delivering packages. Then he moved into driving a semi. right? And they were each better jobs than the one before. And when they actually trained him to drive a semi, like he was in training, it was part of that. UPS always looked internally and allowed people to move up to the company. So my recommendation is always to look internal first and see who you have. You already should know a lot about this person that you don't know about the new candidate coming in. And again, you already know their culture fit. They already understand the company. Learning curve's a lot shorter. However, in small companies, a lot of times there's not. Like for example, with you're looking to hire somebody. You may be looking for somebody to kind of replace some of the duties you do, and they're a new incoming person just isn't going to be at that level. And you've got to hire somebody who's got some experience. Mm-hmm. So you may have to go outside at that point. But I always look internal first.
Okay, and I'm sure if you're looking to kind of shake things up, sometimes maybe looking outside first might be but otherwise it sounds like looking at first.
Yeah, right. There may be, if there's a different strategy there, like you're looking at a department and saying, hey, I need to, you'll see it in sales a lot. The sales departments will get a little complacent. So the manager will bring in a new salesperson who's a very dominant kind of person to challenge everybody to get them going. I used to do it in the pizza delivery world. I bring over a delivery driver who was very, very aggressive driver, because the guys were going too slow, and it would kind of get them to pick up the pace a little bit. They should never break the speed limit, by the way. So, but just to move, hustle on their feet, not in their seat, at least they tell them. But I bring in another guy, and all of a sudden he would be delivering faster. He'd make more money. He'd be taking their deliveries because he's getting quicker, and they would all pick up the pace. So if your strategy is trying to mix up the department, that's different. But generally speaking, if you have a position open up, you want to look internal first and see if you have somebody before you go outside.
As someone who, literally just onboarded or hired an employee here just a few months ago and kind of going through this process, it's a very different economic environment that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And kind of even the process of trying to identify someone and then, very competitive environment right now in hiring. And it was not a fun or an easy process. I know that Sharper Personnel, we had engaged them and really kind of help us a lot with kind of building out this process. But especially right now in this economic environment, what is the best process for going about hiring an employee?
Yeah. Well, in your industry, we're with a few people in the industry. You all's recruitment time is extremely long. Like you need a very specialized person for what you guys do. So it's your recruitment. I was talking to somebody else. They told me that last time they'd hired for a position we're helping them with, it took them, I think, 9 months to find somebody in the previous company they had worked in for that position in accounting. Like it's really, really tough. Process right now. So kind of a little bit of information too is the what they're running into right now with the job boards is that companies, because you have a lot of these free job boards like Indeed, things like that, where you can just post a job for free. So what a lot of companies are doing is they're creating these ghost jobs where it's just, if the right person comes along, they would hire them. So they'll just post a job out there, not necessarily even for actively recruiting. They're just in case somebody comes along and sees it and wants to apply, or they'll forget to shut it down after they've hired, whatever. So you go to the job board. I was just looking for somebody in San Diego, and there were 9,000 project management jobs available in San Diego because people just weren't shutting them down. They're these ghost kind of jobs. So right off the bat, you are dealing with a lot of perceived competition out there. So we'll tell you that we're recommending a lot of our clients that they kind of put a little bit of money behind boosting those posts to get to the first page, because there's just 50 pages of jobs, number one. Number two, the recruiting side, we're working with it now. It's kind of, I almost hesitate to talk about it because we're kind of testing it right now. Not that it's a new concept, but it's a new concept for a lot of our clients in the small business space, is offering sign-on bonuses. It's something that not a lot of small, medium-sized companies are doing. Some of the larger companies in different industries, I was reading about it in the lumber industry, the sawmill industry, they're doing it right now, is they're offering sign-on bonuses to differentiate themselves from their competition. So when people are on the job boards looking, that jumps out. So it's something to go look at and see, is your competition offering sign-on bonuses? And then sign-on bonuses can be structured all different kinds of ways. It's not like day one when they start, you're handing them a $10,000 check. You may say, I'm going to pay it out over the course of a year. It's going to be paid out quarterly. You're not going to get it for the first 90 days. I know somebody recently got one that it was spread out over 3 years. But still mentally it's, I got a $25,000 sign-on bonus, right? It's still that there. So I kind of recommending that just because I got a bunch of guys offering that right now. We'll kind of see how that more information for it later if it worked for us. But it's something that's kind of big right now in the economy we're in to try to differentiate yourself. I'm seeing a lot of industries offering that weren't offering it before. But from there, post your job on the job boards. There's a bunch of them. Is really kind of where you're going now. That's where people are going to look for jobs. Referrals are really good, but keep in mind that referrals are, especially somebody internally, referrals are some of the best people to get in. But keep in mind that the person that referred them usually has an interest in getting them onboarded, so they tend to be more successful, not because they're better candidates, just because the person that referred them is working with them more, right? Because it's their cousins, whatever, and so they have a vested interest in it. So don't always gauge that, referrals must always be better than just the candidates that are coming off the job boards. It's usually something internal that's happening as to why they're better. But really posting on job boards, then what we recommend is using an assessment tool. We use Predictive Index. We run cognitive, which is how fast somebody solves complex problems. It's the number one predictor of job place performance. Then we use behavioral. So we're looking at, is this person going to actually enjoy the work we're asking them to do? Okay. And then from there, we are looking at some past, I tend not to look too much at experience, and I'm more of looking for skills. Now, to say that, it doesn't matter how much I want to be an accountant tomorrow, without an accounting degree and passing the whatever the test is called, I can't be an accountant, right? I have to do. So I understand there's certain jobs, which is what makes your industry difficult, that people have to have certain certifications for. But if you're in a industry or a job you're hiring for doesn't have to have certain certifications, don't necessarily look to see, have they done this exact job before? Look to see, do they have the skills? Have they done something similar to it before? Kind of widen your funnel a little bit and look at that side of things. Also keep in mind that the job market is a lot different than when our parents, were. I probably should actually ahead of time. Your dad, how long did your dad work at the company he worked for?
About 40 years.
Yeah. So my dad was 35 before he retired. That previous generation would just stay at the same place. It was just the thing that they did. There's some different.
Yeah, because you gave an interesting statistic last week on kind of generational. I think the millennials, they're hopping jobs every year and a half or something. The statistic you put up.
Yeah, they're jumping. I think it's every 2 to 3 years right now. It is. So when but that's what we're in right now in the job market. So what a lot of employers are doing is they're looking at a resume and they're saying, this person changes jobs every 2 or 3 years. That's actually the thing right now. You and I have a mutual friend who is in construction, in major commercial construction, that every 2 years he's looking at changing jobs. His current job puts him on a 2-year contract and offers him, they lay it out. And he stayed with the same company for several years now, but every 2 years he's looking at what's out there because it's a very, very competitive market. And that's kind of the way things are done now. It's not like when our parents working and they all worked at the same place 35, 40 years. So experience is something. So experience is only a 12% predictor of long-term job performance. It's actually, just because somebody did something before doesn't mean they're actually good at it. It also, I heard somebody make this comment the other day. Somebody saying they have 8 years of experience, very well may mean that they did the same thing for a year 8 times. Right? I mean, if I'm working at an auto factory, turning the same bolt for 35 years, and the other guy has done it for a year, is it that big of a difference? Probably not. So it's things like that you want to kind of dig through. And also, with the era we're in, people's resume, and there's resume builders out there, there's people who coach people on how to write resumes, there's people in a resume can kind of, I hate sales. I despise it. I'm a terrible salesperson. However, I can put together a killer sales resume. Gary, at one point, Gary, who worked at Sharper, gave me the title of sales manager at one point. I was not the sales manager. Gary was the sales manager. He just it's on my business card, and I could put that on my resume, right? And I've helped in sales in Sharper, so I could put down I've helped sell this much money in revenue. I sell PI subscriptions, which is more like I teach people about it, and they tend to get a subscription. I was the number one salesperson in PI like 2 years in a row. Like I sold True Green when I was in college. I can put together a pretty good resume. Now I worked at True Green and worked there like 2 months and didn't sell a single thing and hated every minute of it. The sales for Sharper is really Gary. I'm more of an order taker. Gary sells everything, but I can put together a really good sales resume if you're offering enough money for the job. So you look at a resume. Kind of to tie into the process is once I've gone through resumes, I'm looking for skills. My phone interview that I have with them at that point is really, I get them talking about the job they worked at before. I don't ask a lot of questions because then based on them talking, I can understand whether they really did what they said they were good, like what they put down that they did. If they can talk intelligently about what they did and can give me a lot of information, then they probably did it. If they're just like, oh yeah, I did sales I did sales at TrueGreen, and that's where it kind of stops, and they can't tell me much more about it, probably don't have a lot of experience on it, even though the resume may say it.
And I'm assuming probably the excitement level or the energy level that they bring to the conversation probably is a little bit of a tip-off as well on whether or not they enjoy the job.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely too. You're looking for kind of those verbal cues and stuff like that. And then from there, we usually go into an in-person interview, which is kind of a cultural interview. Okay. And then I always recommend too that you have somebody on your team who's going to work with them, who's on day-to-day, also interview them for like a third interview as well to get feedback. If your team isn't bought into the new employee coming in, it's probably not going to work either. Now, again, depending on how many layers of management you have, but I always recommend at least a 3-interview process, a phone interview and then 2 in-person interviews. A lot of people can get through 1 or 2 interviews, look pretty good. About interview number 3, you've talked about so much stuff, you'll find out more because they're running out of things to say, and they'll kind of really get to the meat of what's going on. It's always a recommendation.
Now, you had mentioned Predictive Index.
Yeah.
And so what is the kind of maybe the best way to predict how well a candidate may do in that particular job? Is a Predictive Index primarily, if you want to kind of introduce us to that concept? It was something, when I first heard it, I guess probably a year, maybe plus ago now, I heard you talk about it. Of course, took the test myself, and I know my team did as well. And
assessment.
Assessment.
There's no wrong answers.
Okay.
The test is wrong answers.
Okay, I got
assessment
you.
is not.
All right. So I took the assessment, as did my team members at the time.
Yeah.
And it was really enlightening. As far as my existing team members kind of really knowing the best way to kind of interact. But I know it's it's a tool that can be used. But can you kind of talk a little bit about that and what that does for you?
Yeah. So the top 3 predictors of job performance are, number 1, somebody's cognitive ability. Number 2, do they have a growth mindset, which is hard to assess. And number 3 is behavioral assessments.
Now, you mentioned cognitive.
Yep.
So a lot of people, a lot of people think that's intelligence. But,
yep.
Okay.
So those are the top 3 reasons. The bottom 3, I'm not going to remember them all, but I'll kind of give you the bottom 3. The worst predictors are, number 1, they're just like me. Managers do it all the time. Oh, they remind me of me when I was his age, like that comment. It's actually not, just because they were like you 20 years ago doesn't mean they're going to be a good employee. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is trick questions in interviews. I get a lot of people that do that, coming up with these made-up scenarios, trick questions, is actually not a good predictor of job place performance. And number 3, I forgot what the third one is, but those are the kind
memory.
Yeah, probably memory. So kind of give you an idea of the top and bottom. So cognitive is not intelligence. Cognitive is how fast does somebody solve complex problems.
Good.
Best way I can describe it, illustration is I used to teach high school math, and I hand out math tests to the class. And if you all think about when you were in class, you're probably going to immediately think of people in your class that fall in these categories. So one kid would finish in 20 minutes, one kid would finish in 45, right? They both would score 100%. Well, which kid is smarter? I don't know. And everybody would immediately think, oh, the kid in 20 minutes is smarter. It's actually not what that means. Because they both are going to get 100% of their score on their test. They're both going to get A's on their report card. Actually, the student that was in one of my math classes in high school, she was always the last one to turn her paper in. But at the end of the year, she had the best grade in the entire class. Right? And you would have looked and said, we all were frustrated because we'd all be done with waiting on her. It's not intelligent. But back to that. So they both score 100%. Which kid had higher cognitive ability? The kid that finished in 20. That's what we're measuring. He was able to solve all the answers correctly in 20 minutes. The other student did it in 45. Okay. So that's what cognitive is. Just so happens that how fast somebody solves complex problems is the number 1 predictor of job place performance at around 42% predictor. Resume is about 12.
Okay.
So whether they've done it before is only about 12. So it's very, very high. However, most of us ignore that. And again, a lot of it is people think it's intelligence. Think about IQ being the size of the sponge. Cognitive is how fast does the sponge absorb. It's another way of thinking about it. Okay. So what I've experienced in the work environment is you have that employee, that team member that needs you to explain things 3 times, right? Like they're going to get it, but you're going to explain it, and they're going to go back a second time. Then maybe the third time they'll finally get it. Then you have those employees that you tell them the first time, they're like, got it, right? They just learned it quickly. It's a really good replacement, or I think that replacement, I could say is probably this word, for experience. Because really, what is experience? Experience is they already solved the problem before. I'm not asking them to solve a new problem. They've done it before, they're just applying what they've solved before. Well, if I bring somebody in with a high cognitive score that's not done the job, they can solve it in 30 seconds, it's going to look a lot like experience because they can solve it so quickly. So that's where it's a good exchange, which is also why we don't run cognitive on current employees who are performing at a high level. Okay. Because they're already doing the job well. I'm not worried about them learning how to do their current job quickly. So that's number one with cognitive. We run all that on every candidate. The growth mindset one, I usually will go after that one in the interview by asking them what have they done in the last 12 months of additional learning. Have they read books? Have they gotten some additional certification to see if they have this mindset that they want to grow? I don't know an assessment that will give you a growth mindset, and I just found that out. That's kind of how I look for it, is just seeing what have they done. Last one is Predictive Index, which we use not only for hiring. It's about a 28% predictor, still very, very high. We also use it to know how they're going to interact with the rest of the team. Behavioral is what motivates somebody. And what we're looking for is the job we're asking them to do actually going to be the motivator, right? Is the job the carrot, or is the paycheck the carrot, right? And so, because if you like what you do, you never work a day in your life. I always remember, I hate mowing my grass. If my dad's watching this, I blame him for it, because we had to mow. After my parents sold their house to Josh's parents, we moved to 5 acres, and I had to mow 5 acres with a push lawnmower. And so I hate doing yard work. So my yard looks terrible because I don't like doing yard work. The grass will get really long. I have no landscaping. It looks terrible. Across the street from me, he retired 10 years ago. I'm pretty confident to mow his grass. He mows it every other day in the summer. He has 27 bushes and trees in his front yard in a neighborhood. He would never dream of paying somebody to mow his grass, let alone even let them touch it, right? Whereas me, I'll hire somebody, I don't want to touch it. My neighbor actually mows my grass for me. It's great. So, why? Because he loves working in the yard, and because of it, his yard looks amazing. I don't like working in the yard. My yard looks terrible. And that's the kind of the concept when we're looking at employees. If you hire somebody who's only coming to do the job for you because of the paycheck, right, then what's the motivator? More money. The only way to get them to continue the performance level is to put a bunch of rules in there and threaten them with their job, or continue to offer them more money, right? Incentive-based, this and that. And not that you've got to pay what's average for you're not going to be able to pay less and then do this, right? You got to pay what's average for your industry or for that position. But that's a big determining factor of performance and engagement level is, did we get somebody in a job that they really, really enjoy doing? I talked about how much I hate sales. Right? You put me in sales, I'm not going to like doing it. It was like, we assessed some of your employees and kind of went over it. And one of your employees that I think does a lot of bookkeeping, and I saw it, it's like, wow, he really likes bookkeeping. Mm-hmm. And I think he's done it for decades at this point now. And I can look at the behavioral and say, why? Because he's motivated by that type of work. If I were to go and put him in a sales environment, he may do it because he needs the paycheck, needs to support his family, not because he likes sales. And so that's where it just so happens that is a 28% predictor of whether they're going to do well or not, if they actually enjoy the job. So.
Okay. So as a business owner, so you I know we talked a little bit about process, that hiring process. Should me as the business owner, I'm looking to hire someone. Should I be doing the interviews, or is it I know you mentioned there were a 3-interview process, or is that something that should be outsourced? The entire interviewing process, is it hybrid? What should that look like? Because kind of going back, you said earlier, sometimes we have a tendency to hire people we like. Yeah. And I know, when going through doing interviews, that people, as far as individuals that were sent for us, I did not enjoy the process, and then kind of going through that, and probably those first impressions sometimes get seated in our head, and maybe we make a decision. Oh, this person kind of comes across as a jerk. Well, maybe they're just nervous. Yeah. Whatever the case may be. So maybe it's best to outsource that. I mean, what is the kind of the best practice?
I'm going to be a little jaded because I own a freelance recruiting company that does that, so I'm a little jaded with it. But even internally, so in Sharper we have eight companies right now in our ecosystem. All of them utilize and pay the recruiting company. Like they pay for it. I like the third party doing the initial screening for that very reason. And for that very reason, because they have no obviously their vested interest in, we want to get you a candidate. But whether it's your brother or somebody who just applied off of a job board, we don't really know that difference. And maybe they would say it's your brother-in-law. We wouldn't know the name difference. So we'd be like, we would treat them exactly the same. Which, when it comes to hiring, and you and I had this conversation, it's about employees in general, it's about consistency. So when you hire a third party to do that process, to do the front end process, everybody gets treated exactly the same, right? So then you get, even internal candidates, like we have people who will put their internal candidates through that exact same process, so they all get treated exactly the same. So the company like ours, what we will do is we will help write the job posting. We will screen we'll go through all the applications. We'll run all the assessments, essentially collect all the data. And then we'll hold the initial phone interview to say, yes, this is really a real person who's really looking for a job. We're not going to be able to check core values, so we don't know what yours are necessarily. And you got to see if you match them. But we can get all the data together for you. And then at that point, now you're sitting down and you're not worrying about, okay, is this person this or that? It's already been done. All the vetting's been done. Now you're just saying, okay, is this person a cultural fit in here? Is this person that's going to work in our company? Do they hit all the points that I want them to hit from there? And it's, like you said, a lot of our clients don't want to sift through 100, 150 applications. Like sitting down to dig through that and what exactly are you looking for. I recommend a third party for the first batch, and then the last two interviews are internal. In small to medium-sized companies, I recommend that you have somebody else in your company interview them for that first initial interview, and then the owner interview them for the last one. Really to check and say, do I feel like they get the vision? That's what really a vision conversation too. They get the vision of where we're going, and they get a cultural fit in here as well. The match of core values.
So you kind of so you have somebody kind of on the outside screening, and then you have somebody internally, which is kind of going to be more concerned about the day-to-day performance, and then you're going to bring the owner in to see whether or not they feel that this individual aligns with the vision. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's how we do it at Sharper internally. Gary interviews the final interview.
Okay.
Is the final one, and then he gives us feedback based on that. But we've done all the legwork and all the front end work before that. Especially as you know, there's a lot going on, and you don't want to be sitting through. I was sitting at a conference with I forgot his name. I want to say Jim Cook, and he's the owner of Boston Brewing Company, which is Sam Adams beer.
Okay.
That brand. He started that company and owns it. And he talked about for decades. He did the final interview. Like, he was involved in it. They actually use Predictive Index as well. They wanted Predictive Index. They were actually, when they first started Boston Brewing Company, they started using PI. PI's around since 1955.
Okay.
And so he was part of that interview process. To this day, I forgot how many thousands of employees they have. He's not part of that, but he does all of he does 1 day of all the onboarding class. So everybody sees him for a full day in their onboarding class still. So I think as much as possible, not that you're sitting there as the owner going through those applications, but you at some point towards the end should be involved in that process of checking that as well.
Okay. So, Austin, a ton of incredible, valuable information you've given to us today. Somebody wants to work with Sharper Personnel. Can you explain a little bit how they get a hold of get a hold of you or your company, and then what does that process look like? Right now it is difficult to find people, and I'm sure undoubtedly there are listeners that want to reach out and want to engage with you. Can you give us a little bit of contact information? What does that process look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can always go to sharperpersonnel.com. On there's a link where you can kind of fill out some information for us.
Okay.
Kind of get to know a little about your company, see if we're going to be a fit for you or not. And then somebody from our office will immediately, usually within 5 minutes, reach out to you from there and kind of walk you through this process that I'm going to walk you through. And you can always email me at austin@sharperprocess.com as well. The website might be easier to get you more information. From there, we have you fill out a questionnaire. Like I said, we take that, jump on a call with you, and then we have an in-house copywriter that writes the job posting, puts it all together for you. They also will give you some feedback. We actually internally, will run comps to make sure that, can we find somebody in your market? Are there people looking for jobs in that kind of job in your market? What's the standard pay? Things like that. Like, we don't take every job, because if we don't feel like we can supply it, we're going to tell you, hey, this is a really tough one right now. So we'll kind of help you with that first part of that, consulting a little bit on helping to put it all together. We'll write the job posting. We'll post it on the job boards. Then think about us as lead managers. So anything coming off the job boards, any leads that you have, referrals, things like that, all are going to come to us. We at that point are going to run the assessments on them, cognitive and behavioral. We're then going to hold the initial phone. We're going to go through all their resumes. I'll make sure they're updated. A lot of times the job boards are not updated. You need updated ones from them. Check that. We then are going to hold the initial phone interview and then provide a packet with, okay, here's who this person is. They hit all the markers you told us you were looking for. We also do not recommend who you hire. We're just collecting all of that data and saying, here. So we're bringing it down from 100 down to maybe 5. That's saying, here's the 5 people who actually qualify and meet all the markers we're looking for in this job. And then from there, it's for you to decide, which one of them fits the company based on your interview internal process. But we're going to bring it all the way up to that point there for you. That's great.
Awesome. Austin, appreciate you being here today.
Cool.
Once again, this is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business Podcast. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Belk on Business Podcast. Leave us a review. And once again, if you want to get a hold of Sharper Personnel, we'll put the information in the show notes. Austin, once again, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.